Hello, good evening everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Eylon Levy, a spokesman for the Prime Minister's office. Thank you for joining us. I will start with a brief update before taking your questions. 16 days from the October 7th massacre, the number of confirmed Israeli hostages in Gaza now stands at 222, from babies to elderly Holocaust survivors. They have still not been visited by the Red Cross. Among those hostages are 30 children under the age of 16. We expect the international community to intensify its pressure on the war criminals of Hamas and make every possible effort to secure the safe, immediate and unconditional return of those 222 hostages. Now, an update on the latest figures. As of 12 p.m. today, the Israeli death toll since the October 7th massacre now stands at over 1,400, with hundreds of bodies still being identified. Over 5,312 people have been injured, and there have been 7,750 rocket attacks from Gaza, forcing millions of Israelis into bomb shelters. Now, as we continue with our efforts to totally dismantle Hamas's governing and military capabilities, the IDF has struck at least 320 military targets in the Gaza Strip over the past 24 hours. These sites included a terrorist tunnel network, dozens of operational command centers, and mortar shelling and anti-tank missile launch posts. The IDF also continues to respond to Hezbollah's aggression on the Lebanese border, thwarting a number of attempted assaults from Lebanon and successfully striking terrorist cells. We repeat, Israel is not interested in a two-front conflict. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned yesterday against any escalation, warning that if Hezbollah decides to enter the war, it will be making the mistake of a lifetime. Israel continues to welcome international support for its campaign to defeat Hamas in response to the October 7th massacre. This morning, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis met with the Prime Minister here in Israel, offering Athens full support for Israel's duty to defend itself against Hamas's atrocities. This continues a series of solidarity visits to Israel by world leaders from the US, UK, Germany, Romania, Italy, Ukraine, the Netherlands. President Macron of France is also expected to arrive this week. Now, I want to address the atrocities of October 7th and the evidence that Israel has laid out for the international media to see. On the morning of October 7th, Hamas launched a barbaric attack against the Israeli people with the aim of committing atrocities that would shock the world. In a campaign of systematic extermination and ethnic cleansing, the terror organization sworn to a second genocide of the Jews in its charter committed an act of genocide on our soil. It beheaded, butchered, and burned Israelis till there was nothing left of them recognizable as human remains. It committed brutal rape. It tortured and dismembered parents in front of children, children in front of parents. Tragically, we are witnessing a Holocaust denial-like phenomenon evolve in real time, with disturbing denial about the savagery and magnitude of Hamas's crimes. Therefore, today, Israel took the painful step of screening for over 200 foreign journalists raw, unedited footage of Hamas's atrocities on October 7th, as captured on its death squad's body cams. In the past, perpetrators of crimes against humanity tried to hide their crimes, but Hamas filmed it in order to glorify and revel in these atrocities. Earlier today, I watched over 40 minutes of the raw footage taken from Hamas death squads. 40 minutes of stomach-turning, pure evil. 40 minutes taken from hundreds of hours of footage recovered from Hamas body cameras, mobile phones, dash cam footage, the victims' own phones, CCTV cameras, victim social media, and Hamas's own social media. I watched the whole thing. I wish I hadn't. The 200 journalists who saw the footage will report on the sick and depraved atrocities against our people, against our families, against our loved ones. But seared in my mind are the bodies. Burned bodies, beheaded bodies, mangled, bloodied remains of bodies. Bodies in open fields, bodies in blood-covered bedrooms. Bodies dragged out of cars, bodies lining the side of the roads, bodies in body bags, bodies in rows upon rows of body bags, so many that Zaka rescue teams went through 4 years of equipment in 3 days. Bodies in pools of blood, bodies lying on top of mangled piles of bodies, where Hamas has thrown grenades into bomb shelters to blow our young people's limbs from their bodies. We see the body of a young woman in the back of a pickup truck, her leg bent unnaturally backward, as terrorists holding RPGs straddle her body, yelling Allahu Akbar, as civilians join in the chorus to celebrate the booty these death squads brought back to Gaza. Bodies twitching, bodies, blood streaming from their necks, and Hamas terrorists shoot them to finish them off and check they're dead. Beheaded bodies of soldiers, as Hamas terrorists trample their bodies. Inside Gaza, the lifeless, bloodied body of a soldier dragged out of a car. Savages trample him, as civilians crowd around him and scream Allahu Akbar in jubilation, with pure joy on their faces, taking turns to crush the corpse with their feet. We see the body of a Thai worker, barely still alive, covered in blood, as some depraved savage tries to hack at his neck with a hoe. We see one body of a woman, her face burned so badly her lips have burned off, and all we see is her teeth, her legs wide open. Babies' bodies. We see the body of a baby shot in the head. Burned bodies of babies. I mean, burned to a crisp. Burned babies, plural. I mean, so badly burned that I had to ask the video to be stopped so that it could be explained to me that the piece of coal on the screen was the burned corpse of an Israeli baby. We see a burned body, mouth gagged, fabric still tied in its mouth. We see one body burned so badly that the skin on the head has burned away completely, and you see the white of the skull. We see burned corpses, burned to a cinder, frozen in terror, bodies twisted, like the human remains from Pompeii. How many burned bodies? We hear the first responders ask, and someone counts 8. We see bodies burned so badly they are still smoking, just lumps of coal. We see human ash that the world has not seen since Auschwitz. This was Hamas's October 7th massacre. This is the evil that we are up against. This is the evil that Israel will eliminate with the total defeat and dismantling of Hamas for the sake of our people and for the sake of humanity. I will now take your questions. Please raise your hand if you would like, and we'll begin with a few questions that have been submitted in advance. We have a question from Breitbart News. Today, journalists were able to view raw footage of the Hamas terror attack. We were told this attack is not about Islam. How then do we understand the fact that the terrorists shout Islamic slogans as they murder people and they take them hostage in Gaza Strip? Look, this is about an extreme, unhinged unhinged terrorism based on moral perversions and blatant violent anti-Semitism. The October 7th massacre was the single largest attack against Jews since the Holocaust, the second largest terror attack in world history after 9/11, and we're sure that it has completely shocked everyone of conscience around the world. A question from Yael Benaya of ABC News about whether President Joe Biden gave a specific instruction to delay the ground invasion in order to secure the release of more hostages. Look, since this war erupted, Israel and the United States have been working very closely hand in hand together, and the level of cooperation between our two countries is unprecedented. We've heard President Biden speaking very firmly in support of Israel's right and duty to defend itself and pursue that goal of dismantling and defeating Hamas. Israel is particularly appreciative of the United States backing, both in terms of words and deeds. Naturally, I'm not going to comment on Israel's specific military plans and their timing, and the next stage of the operation will continue in accordance with our operational needs. Do we have any questions from journalists on the line, please?
I'm muting you now. There's a question I'm going to ask Pell to come on.
Can we ask Pell, please? You've raised your hand. Yes. Thank you very much for your question. The pro-Hamas protests that we have seen around the world have been especially sickening, including the genocidal cries against Jews, including from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which is a call to eliminate the the State of Israel, and on the morning of October 7th, we saw exactly how Palestinian terror groups seek to eliminate the State of Israel with acts of barbarous, murderous terrorism. I think everyone has been sickened by expressions of sentimental affection that we have seen for Hamas terrorists, some paragliders even becoming slogans of resistance and protest on some university campuses, I think perhaps by people who don't understand that the terrorists of Hamas would murder them too, object to their values, would brutalize them too if given half a chance. And we're continuing in our efforts, and as I said earlier, screening this footage for global media because apparently some people around the world are still in denial about the extent of Hamas's atrocities against our people. We're continuing to speak very firmly, shine a spotlight on the atrocities of October 7th in order to expose to the world the true face of Hamas, the genocidal terror organization that perpetrated the October 7th massacre. It is not an organization that anyone of conscience, anyone with a shred of moral fiber or humanity can possibly support. And we appreciate the support and solidarity that Israel has been receiving around the world, people who understand that we have a right and we have a duty to stand up and defend ourselves. And in the face of a crime against humanity, we're defending not only our people, we're also defending humanity itself. Next question, please. Sure. We have a question about. We have a question from Coach Winehouse about the countries from which the journalists attended. Today's conference was organized by the government press office. I will have to check whether we have a breakdown by country and circle back to you. I will follow up on that. If you can leave contact details in the chat, please. David, we have a question from you, please. Naturally, the various options for continuing with our ground operation in our efforts to destroy Hamas in the wake of the October 7th massacre, many options have been considered and analyzed, but the State of Israel is going to proceed in accordance with its operational needs, and we're not going to address any particular disagreements to the extent they may have arisen behind the scenes. We are continuing to demand the immediate and unconditional release of all of our hostages and demand immediate Red Cross access to them as well. Beyond that, we can't comment. Do we have any other questions? One more question, please, from the News Forum. David from the News Forum. The footage that the IDF screened earlier through the government press office, much of it is new and sensitive, including because of the identity of the victims, and for that reason the journalists who watched it were asked not to bring in any recording equipment and to write with a pen and paper. You understand these are images that are deeply, deeply traumatic, and the victims' families are traumatized enough. Of course, we have to tread a very fine line between exposing these atrocities to the world and taking care of the psychological and emotional well-being of our people. Some of the footage has already circulated. It's already been around, but for further questions, I would refer you to the IDF spokesperson's unit. But I would add, 200 journalists saw that footage today. 200 journalists sat in an auditorium and wept and cried and gasped as they saw the horrific atrocities that Hamas perpetrated on the 7th of October and filmed it. And you know, for me personally, that's perhaps the most difficult thing to get my head around, because we're so used to the history of the 20th century seeing brutal authoritarian regimes trying to cover up the evidence of their crimes. And here we have a terrorist organization that live-streamed so much of it in its own social media channels, in some cases from its victims' own phones, on their victims' own social media accounts. And that's particularly gruesome and disturbing fact of the evidence that's been coming to light. Okay, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much, and we will continue with the daily briefings tomorrow. Thank you very much, everyone. Please keep safe.